we ended up a while ago in the previous video asking what is Aristotle's theory of natural function? Just listen while I'm going to look for the text, but Aristotle distinguishes four kinds of substances corresponding to his prior distinction between four kinds of causes. The four causes are to be thought of as B causes or explanatory functions, including formal, material, efficient, and final cause. It is only efficient it is only efficient mechanical cause as expressed in the laws of modern physics that many philosophers and scientists think of today as causation. A formal cause in Aristotle's first philosophy is an explanation offered in terms of definitions and species of things. The secondary substances that exist only insofar as they inhere in primary substances. Formal causes explain phenomena in terms of the kinds of principles Aristotle derives from Plato's concept of the forms, including or as well as number, shape, and other mathematical principles and relations. A material cause explains a phenomenon in terms of the physical stuff of which a thing is made, without which we cannot completely understand what we hope to have explained. An efficient cause involves the mechanical motions of things interacting with one another under the laws of physics in order to bring about a change in an entity. An efficient cause is whatever changes things by transfer of energy in physical events to bring it about that one object is in a certain physical state at a latter time is no longer in that state. The final cause of a phenomenon is the end of reason for which it was accomplished. The purpose or telos that explains why the caused event took place. In the case of events brought about by human agents, it is usually easy to specify a final cause. Since actions are generally performed for a reason or with a certain motivation in order to achieve a certain purpose. Aristotle interestingly maintains that all natural occurrences take place because of a final cause, even when human agency is not directly involved. Contemporary science is different, among other ways, from Aristotelian science, primarily because of the fact that science emphasizes efficient causation and because it includes reference to material factors and formal features of physical events, especially the mathematical properties of entities involved in efficient causal interactions, while virtually ignoring, if not totally eliminating, final causes from natural science. An example that Aristotle discusses in his Physics to illustrate the application of the four causes is that of a statue whose complete explanation requires all four causes. The statue, as it exists in part because it has a certain shape or form. This is its formal cause. Secondly, the statue is also made of a certain physical stuff to be explained by what Aristotle calls its material cause. Thirdly, the statue is produced by the actions of the sculptor, imposing a certain form on the chosen material, chiseling away at the stone, let us say, and even polishing and in other ways shaping the substance of the statue as an efficient causal explanation must explain. Fourthly, and finally, the existence of the statue also needs to be understood in terms of the reasons why it came to be made and what purpose it is supposed to serve. Probably the statue was made to adorn a garden or a public building so that the artist could express his or her thoughts and perhaps to make money or win a competition or impress another person. There can be many separate purposes in the final cause of a thing's existence and condition, which is to say of the secondary substances that inhere in a given primary substance. Aristotle similarly divides substances into four subcategories corresponding to the four causes. These concern essence, form, matter, and the combination of form and matter in a primary substance. What is conspicuously missing from this list when compared with the four Aristotelian causes is the final or teleological sense of substance. This, as we shall see, is significant. The reason or purpose for a thing's existence is not intuitively characterizable as a substance, but turns out to be indispensable in Aristotle's theory of identity conditions of a substance's essence and of the theological component of his metaphysics. Let's read these lines. But there's something that we must do first, and it's in color green, obviously. Before turning to these, and that it give at least a schematic answer to the question, what is substance? We go now to page 74. Here. There is no doubt a whole range of ways in which substance is spoken of, and yet four are of special significance. The substance of a particular thing is variously held to be A, that which it was to be that thing, B, the universal, and C, the genus. And there's also a fourth item in this list, namely D, the subject. Now, the subject is that of which other entities are said, it itself never being said of anything else. Consequently, it is important first to achieve a definition of this, for a strong case can be made for the claim that it is the primary subject that is substance to the fullest extent. What then is the primary substance? Well, there is a way in which matter, another way in which shape form, and a third in which the composite is assigned this whole. There, matter and form, the composite. In speaking here of matter, I have in mind, say, the bronze of a statue, while by shape form, I mean the geometry of the object's appearance, and by the composite, the statue itself as a whole entity. Now, this means that if the form is prior to and more real than the matter, then it will, by parity of reasoning, also be prior to the composite. The concept of natural function is explained in terms of Aristotle's four causes, and especially by reference to final or teleological causes, the purpose of things. Natural functions pervade Aristotle's discussion of substance, and as such, are a main ingredient of his first philosophy. We have already seen an important example of Aristotle's use of the idea of natural functions in the very first sentence of the Metaphysics, in which he asserts that all persons desire by nature to know. It is thus a function of the human being to want to acquire knowledge, as Aristotle thinks of the activities that characterize human life. Nor is Aristotle's notion of natural function limited to intelligent social animals such as ourselves. Although there are different kinds of substances, human beings constitute just one category among all the existent things inhabiting the world, each of which has special distinguishing natural functions by which they are known. Aristotle regards natural functions as germane not only to living things, human beings, and other animals and plants, but also to inanimate objects of every kind, and even to the material elements of which physical bodies are composed. A natural function is what an entity naturally does, left to its own devices, so to speak, without external interference in whatever it does or whatever happens to it. If it is the natural function of human beings, no doubt, among other things, to know, then as long as no obstacle occurs, human beings will tend to seek and augment their knowledge. If it is the natural function of an acorn to grow into an oak tree, then if nothing happens to prevent it and the proper natural conditions are fulfilled, the acorn will naturally, in time, become an oak. Where inanimate objects are concerned, their natural functions, as Aristotle conceives them, are less complicated, but also less familiar and more theoretical. The natural functions of a complex non-living physical entity are determined by the natural functions of its component material substances. That is, the natural function of something made of some combinations of earth, air, fire, and water is a result of the exact proportions of these material elements combined in one thing and of the natural functions by which each is characterized. The behavior of compound substances immediately becomes difficult to explain and predict. What we can say following Aristotle's discussion of the natural function of the material elements is that they all tend, in the absence of interference, to move towards an appropriate characteristic part of the physical universe. Earth, for example, set free in space, has a natural function of moving towards the very center of the universe. That's why Aristotle believed that Earth is at the center of the universe. Water naturally seeks the next highest level close to Earth, but below the natural level of fire and air, all of which naturally gravitate towards their corresponding levels of substances below the ether as the material element of the heavenly bodies. The natural function of a material element in every case is thus a matter of where the substances go when released. What is their destination when they are unencumbered by the presence of other kinds of substances that might otherwise block their way? Where do they naturally find their home from the center of the universe to its outermost periphery? A natural function in this teleological sense is thus explainable in Aristotle's first philosophy as a final cause. It is the purpose and or telos of earth, air, fire, water, and ether to move toward their respective appropriate locations in the world. The same is true of more complex kinds of primary substances. It is the purpose of an acorn to grow into an oak and produce other acorns to produce other oaks. It is among the natural purposes of human beings to know, Aristotle seems to believe, and as such, prior to whatever other purposes, we persons as agents of purposeful action might choose for ourselves. We cannot fully explain the existence of a primary substance unless we explain it in terms of all four causes. To explain in the most general first philosophical terms the changes that substances undergo from the standpoint of their teleological causes requires appeal to their natural functions. In every case, a natural function can be understood as an instantiation of a different contrary term in a specific contrariety according to its final cause. An object's natural function is further understood by Aristotle as fulfilling its potential. Potentiality, in this sense, is not merely logical possibility, but the entire range of possibilities in which the object can actually satisfy its natural function. An acorn is potentially an oak tree, and a human being is, among other things, potentially a knower. An acorn satisfies its natural function by fulfilling its potential, which it can do in practice in a number of ways, depending on the exact circumstances that happen to prevail. An acorn can become an oak tree by growing here or there, bending its roots around the stone, or by sending them straight down into the unresisting soil, and so on. A human being can become a knower and thereby fulfill his or her potential according to this natural function in many different ways by learning science or mathematics or history or art. A person can acquire knowledge here or there, learning this or that in this or that way. The possibilities, in any case, even when they are many, are not limitless, but constrained within definite limits determined by an object's natural function and potential. Aristotle explains the implication of his conception of potentiality in terms of the distinction between a substance's essence and accidental properties, where essential properties of things are concerned. To change an object so radically as to deprive any of its essential properties is in fact to annihilate it. By contrast, to change an object with respect to any of its accidental properties can thus be defined in Aristotle's system as whatever properties can be changed in an object without destroying it. It is not every entity that survives every sort of change, but there's always a distinction to be drawn between an object's essential and accidental properties. Any primary substance has both essential and accidental properties. Secondary substances considered in themselves may have only essential properties, and accidental properties only insofar as they are considered in relation to the contingently existing primary substances in which they inhere. A primary substance can undergo any change of any of its accidental properties and survive the change as the identical object, having merely been altered in its condition without vanishing from the world. Insofar as any of the primary substance's essential properties are changed, the object does not survive the change. It does not persist or preserve its identity through the change, but is so radically transformed as to cease to exist as the kind of thing it was. If I, as a human being, am essentially a rational animal, and if I am also accidentally musical, I might lose my musical ability, but I will not thereby be destroyed. I will persist as the identical person I was before, minus my talent for music. As we have observed, if as a rational animal I am somehow permanently deprived of my reason or of my animality, then I must cease to exist. I will not, in that case, be merely altered with respect to one of my accidental properties, but so corrupted in what is indispensable to my identity as to no longer exist as a human being. Aristotle speaks in these kinds of contexts of being a human being as such, or of my identity or considered as a human being. In that case, I do not survive the change as a human being, although obviously something or other ordinarily survives, even if it is only a living animal that is no longer truly human, or a dead body that was once a human being by virtue of having been a rational animal by persisting through the change. Similarly, with respect to the essential and accidental properties of every other primary substance, with respect to non-sensible things or immovables, in particular the definitions, species, or secondary substances, as well as numbers and other arithmetical and geometrical entities, they have no natural function because considered in themselves, they are separable from sensibles in Aristotle's ontology and thereby merely accidental. Aristotle explains the difference between essential and accidental properties in terms of a further distinction between productive and artless or indefinite potentials or capacities. He states that things that exist according to accident are contingent rather than necessary, giving as a favorite example again the case of a white musician. Aristotle claims that such accidents as whiteness and being musically talented must be the result of matter and hence require a material cause. Since matter, unlike form, exists contingently as the stuff of logically possible but not logically necessary primary substances. Let's read this quote in front of you. The other things that have corresponding productive capacities sometimes, but for accidents, there is no skill or dedicated capacity. For when things are or are generated accidentally, their cause is also accidental. If then, not everything either is or is generated always or of necessity, but most things are for the most part, then there must be that which is accidentally. For instance, the white man is neither always nor for the most part musical, so that when he becomes musical, this will be an accident. If not, everything would be of necessity. It is then matter capable of being other than it is for the most part that is the cause of the accident. The connection between essential properties and natural functions is clinched in the passage when Aristotle defines essence in terms of function. The essential properties of any entity are explained teleologically as its natural function, what it is disposed to do if uninhibited. Aristotle gives an example to illustrate the relation between essence and function in the case of the soul as the essence of an animal's bodily substance. The soul of an animal, as Aristotle understands it, is functionally interpreted as a natural inclination for sensation and self-animated motion. Aristotle's entrenchment in the theory of natural function as the analysis of essential properties is reflected in his analogy of a dead finger. The object, once part of a living hand, is a finger equivocally or in name only. Aristotle believes, since it has been deprived of its essence by the loss of a natural function in its powerful movement, plays a very important role. Let's read this pink quote in front of you. In the case of animals, it is the soul, the substance of the living thing, that is the substance of a specified that is the substance as specified in the account. The form and what it was to be that thing for a body of this kind. At any rate, I take it that no such body can be satisfactorily, non-shoddily defined in isolation from its function, and that this will not be performed in the absence of perception. So the parts of the soul will indeed be prior, either in all cases or in some, to the composite animal, and ditto with the particulars. The body, on the one hand, and its parts will be posterior to the substance that is the soul, and it will be not the substance, but the composite that is divided into them as into matter. Thus, in a way, these material parts are prior to the composite, and in a way not, is as much as they cannot be in separation from composite. It is not the finger in any state that you like that is the finger of the animal. As witness, the merely homonymous dead finger. It is reasonable for Aristotle, with his interest in biology, to choose a dead finger as an example to represent his thesis that the essence of a thing is defined in terms of its natural function. The implication is that to deprive an entity of its natural function is to deprive it of its essence. These, by virtue of the distinction between essential and accidental properties, is to destroy the entity as a thing of its original kind. There's generally something left over, which in this case we can continue to call a finger if we want. Aristotle claims, however, that we can only do so homonymously, using the same word finger inappropriately in both circumstances, both while it is capable and after it is no longer capable of performing its natural function. When a finger is dead and no longer able to move as a little living finger, it has ceased literally to be a finger, because it cannot do what fingers are supposed and defined as being able to do. The flesh and bone that remains is not really a finger according to Aristotle, and is referred to as such only equivocally, using the word improperly when the requirements for qualifying as a genuine finger are no longer satisfied. It is accidental to a finger that it be any particular color, or even that it be human or non-human. But it is essential, according to Aristotle, for a finger to be able to flex and curl and move in the ways that are characteristic of a living finger. Elsewhere, Aristotle makes the identical point involving the example of a stone flute in a statue that is not really or truly a flute. It is misdescribed as such because it looks superficially like a genuine flute, despite the fact that it is unable to perform the natural function of a flute because it is incapable of playing music. It is therefore appropriate at this point to refer to Aristotle's first philosophy of substance as functionalist. Insofar as the theory of substance is concerned with the essential properties of things, the analysis of essence as natural function in Aristotle's metaphysics provides a non-circular way of understanding essential properties. The account is independent of the main conclusion Aristotle wants to make, that changes in essential properties destroy a substance, while changes in accidental properties are tolerated as alterations that do not threaten a substance's identity. Aristotle avoids the circularity that would otherwise threaten his theory of substance and change. He offers an independent account of essential properties in terms of natural functions, and thereby frees the distinction between essential and accidental properties from the vicious circle of assuming that substances survive and persist through alterations of their accidental properties, but are destroyed if changed with respect to any of their essential properties. Let's look at how we've just spoken about the theory of natural function by Aristotle. Next, we will look at Aristotle's understanding of secondary substances and how this was perceived as a solution to Plato's third man. Again, please share, like, and post this commentary in your social media accounts and invite people to subscribe to keep the channel alive. Again, thank you very much for your attention. This is again Samo't sa simula. Maraming salamat po.